What's up, you lazy, entitled, basement-dwelling millennials, bootstrapping boomers, apathetic Xers, and goddamn Gen Z kids today? Today, it's just lonely here with Taylor and I, no guests, which means we had a lot less technical difficulties getting this whole thing fired up and started, which is
also a lot less brain power.
Yeah.
So,
which is good. I literally just got back from Colorado yesterday, 11-day trip, and my brain power was definitely not on the podcast for today. So the less brain power we had to put into setup, the better. The more I get to donate to you guys listening to us here.
no, I meant we have less brain power here today.
Oh, yeah.
with no guests.
That is true. See how much brain power I'm putting into this already?
Right.
Right out of the gate.
We're coming in strong.
Oh, man. And forgive me if I cough a little bit here and there. I've had a cough for like 2.5 weeks that I just can't seem to shake. So, that long COVID probably going on again.
It is going around. A lot of my coworkers are sick, and they're all weak. Just kidding. Just kidding.
All right. Well, anyway, without more of our bantering here, let's get into what we're doing. And today we're going to talk about elections, election days, more or less kind of the importance of knowing and understanding the history, how you having the right to vote is something that you as a human being probably didn't always have. If
Most
you go
likely
back,
not. Yeah.
if you go back far enough, and why that means it, even though when it feels like your votes don't matter, they still are important.
Right, and the history that's built upon your right to that vote is quite fraught with a lot of
a lot of hard work, sweat, tears, blood. A lot has been sacrificed for you to be able to vote, and it's important, if nothing else, to pay homage to the people who made those sacrifices to give you that right to just go and do it.
That's right. Hopefully, they didn't fight for nothing.
So and then I think it's important because we always talk about big elections, obviously presidential elections, Senate races. Sometimes people get into congressional races a little bit more, but you start getting down the list and people get more and more disengaged and disinterested, and it should almost be the other way around.
Yeah, I mean, obviously the president, who's president, is important. Who's running for your federal representation, also very important. But as we've said time and time again, what really makes change in this country is a grassroots effort. And that comes from presidential elections like 2022. And to a lesser extent, I have to say, November 2023, November 7th, it will matter, and we're going to talk about it, how there are some things that Minnesota specifically has coming up. But it is definitely like the least important of all the elections.
I wouldn't say it's the least important. It's worth noting.
There's like 1 to 4.
Right.
There's 4 major elections. Sure. So like I put it a 1. Not to say it's unimportant.
No.
But to say that it is not a 4.
It's off your stuff, and it's important varies on who and what is on the ballot, because a lot of these things are ballot initiatives and amendments that go on around the country, and we won't be able to talk about what's going on in your local towns. But everybody, you should look and see if anything on November 7th is coming up, which will probably be the day this airs.
I think so. We'll see. We'll see though. But speaking to just everybody across the United States, I actually found this great site. You may or may not have heard of it. It's called ballotpedia.org. And it will show you, based off your address, what initiatives, who's up for office, and what, if anything, you have to vote for.
Oh, that's awesome.
Where I live, there is nothing to vote for. There is no voting. But just a few miles to the north of me is Anoka-Hennepin School Board election that we're going to talk about later. That is a big deal for students and parents that are affected by that, or just people in general who want to have their voice heard. So there's a lot going on across the country, and I found it to be extremely helpful.
Absolutely, that's a great resource, and I'll have to look up because I don't think I've got anything coming up here locally on the 7th.
Boy, so prepared.
I know. I'm doing great here today.
You'd rather be in Colorado right now. I can tell.
Well, yeah, no, I'm a long vacation. It was a great time, but I'm glad I'm back. But still trying to get into back into everyday gear and still get ready for fall. This time of year sucks.
Yeah,
I
no
hate
place
the
like
fall.
home.
Yeah. But anyway, so going back in through history, you know, our country, despite being founded in 1776, wasn't really founded in 1776. Like,
No, we declared our independence.
yeah, we said we were our own thing. We weren't actually our own thing, you know, until like we won the war, and then once we won the war, we had to kind of figure out now what are we doing with all this stuff.
Right.
So 1789 was kind of where
Constitution's ratified.
Constitution's ratified, and this is where people start to get voting, started to be allowed to vote for the people who are going to represent them.
Some people, at least.
Some people. And those people were white people, obviously, particularly ones with penises who had property, which was a very small subset of the population.
Yeah, nothing like is founding a country upon the pillars of democracy and then only allow a total of around 6% of that population to vote. I don't know if you can get more hypocritical than that. Our founding fathers, they did a pretty good job, but this is where I would grade them at an F minus for level of democracy
So
or
bad.
just like liberalism as a whole.
Absolutely so bad. Yeah, that's and that's why we say, you know, going back in your lineage, even if you're a white guy, if you're a poor white guy who didn't own property, go fuck yourself, you know?
Clearly.
So obviously some people were disgruntled about that, and as the way it goes, more white men got more power more quickly. So it was around 1820, states started expanding rights to all white men over the age of 21.
Yeah, regardless of land ownership.
Yeah. So that's nice. You know, you could be a renter, which still vote.
Yeah, I mean, and granted, this isn't every state, mind you, so far. Each state was allowed to run its own elections, and so that was just what most states decided for themselves.
What's crazy too, and I can't remember who it was off the top of my head, but someone in conservative leadership recently floated the idea of only allowing people who own.
Going back to the property ownership.
Yeah, and it's like, wow, like the tone deafness.
Does that mean that corporations get like a 20% vote?
Yeah, I mean, probably,
Like,
you know.
like they own whatever, even just corporate offices, not even counting like single-family home purchasing or apartment building ownership. Like,
Well, hey, if money is speech, why can't the number of addresses you possess be the number of votes you
right?
get?
It's foolproof.
1845, we settled on Tuesdays in 1845.
Yeah, I guess, back then, not many people had cars or anybody.
1845, yeah. Car ownership as percent of population was very low.
less than 6%. And so it took a while for people to get places, specifically their polling places. And so essentially, we decided that couldn't be on a weekend because of church on Sundays.
Yeah.
And then...
Also, nobody from the government works on a weekend.
Right. But then Tuesdays were safe because people could travel on Mondays and they can get to their polling place by Tuesday, vote on Tuesday, head back home, and be ready for apparently market day. It was Wednesday. I don't know what that was the thing, I guess. And so that's why Tuesday is the day. And then specifically November because it's after harvest, but it's pre-freezing your butt off. Traveling across your states for the most part.
These people haven't been to Minnesota before.
Right. November, first week of November can clearly have snow, especially back then. I sure what it was, but it was a compromise between harvest and winter. But so 1845-ish, that was the rule for first Tuesday in November.
And we stick with that today. Typical outdated policies that we haven't moved on from.
Yeah, I mean, it's stuck.
Yeah, and there's nothing wrong with it. We just need to make it, I think, a national holiday because, again, they did this so people had the time to move, and it wasn't a national holiday, but people still work. People work more today than they did back then or at any point in our history.
Right. I think you move it to Monday and make it a national holiday,
Yep.
voting holiday.
Yep.
Just a 3-day weekend like we love to do. And
you can
easy
vote
peasy.
hungover. Yeah.
Oh, maybe we should do Friday. You vote and then you party.
Yeah. That's yeah.
That might be more fun.
I don't know. It might be, but then people would go out of town and just skip the voting altogether.
That's true.
So I think
Yeah,
the
figure-
Monday's right.
well,
I think
you-
showing up to
you
vote hungover
on your way out of town.
Yeah.
Like,
Then
of
you got
course,
everybody-
that would create a lot of congestion around the polling
It
time.
would.
If we're not going to go electronic, then
Okay. Fuck it. Let's just do it on a Wednesday. In the middle of the week, you get a random day off, but you can't go
yeah.
anywhere that confines you to work on both days. So you just get the day off. You get to go vote, and then you can have a nice day to do laundry or some shit. That's
right?
what.
Yeah, clean your house.
There we go.
Feed your dogs. Play with your dogs.
All right. So then, where are we now? 1870.
1870. Yeah. So the 15th Amendment, and by the way, we love amending our Constitution in order to give people more voting rights that we did not give them originally.
Yeah.
So while these things are really good that we did them, it's also pretty bad that it took, freaking nearly 100 years before we actually banned states from denying the right to vote based on race.
And we didn't really ban them.
Well, right. We officially banned it, but we didn't ban ways that people could deter people of color from voting. So there's a lot of different methods. As you can imagine, people get pretty creative around their racism. And that led to the Jim Crow era and white primaries, basically disenfranchising black and poor white people, though definitely black and other minorities to a much greater extent, for participating in democracy.
Well, and they made a lot of loopholes that white people could jump through who wouldn't pass the test or pay the poll taxes or anything like that.
Grandfather clauses, basically anybody who could vote before the Civil War.
You could still vote.
You could still vote, but all these new rules, like they'd apply to everybody else. So,
and everybody else was brown people.
Yeah.
Yep. And this is one that surprised me. 1890, the ever liberal and progressive state of Wyoming, was the first state to give women voting rights.
That's right. We got to give props where props is due. And Wyoming, probably for the first time and possibly the last time ever in this podcast history, we will give you the rights for just a real good attaboy.
Yep.
For being the first state.
Yeah, that's golf clap to Wyoming for doing something right.
Yep.
In 1890, you're due again if you feel like
right, every 100 years or so.
Actually, we just stopped in Wyoming because I didn't realize how close Fort Collins. I stayed with some family in Fort Collins.
Yeah, it's like 30 miles.
Yeah,
right?
and Emily's like, we should go north today. We kept going south, and I was like, okay, what's north? I was like, Wyoming. Wyoming is the next thing north. So we went to Cheyenne for the day.
To be fair, that's like the one city that's I guess Jackson Hole, whatever.
Yeah.
But that's really far away.
I don't know. The people are like, you should go check out Laramie. It's a college town. It's a good time. And I'm like, I feel like it's not. I mean, like, I'm sure it is, but like,
Right.
I feel like there's better college towns that I've been to just like earlier today.
I mean, specifically, just not existing in Wyoming is a good first step.
I mean,
being
there
a
is
better college town.
nothing there. I mean,
Yeah.
it is so.
I've
I've
just
driven,
like Minnesota has like hundreds of those towns. So
yeah. But
Maybe
this
not
was
hundreds,
isn't
but a lot.
Cheyenne their state capital? I guess I don't even know.
yeah, I think so. Or it's like a really small town that's like kind of like a St. Paul.
I mean,
smaller
Cheyenne
than-
is a tiny ass town. We walked around the whole. I think
yeah.
Pine City is bigger. Pine City, Minnesota, might be bigger than Cheyenne, Wyoming.
We might have to fact check that.
Yeah, we
after
might.
the episode.
Anyway, moving on from this completely unrelated topic back
Right.
to 1920, when the 19th Amendment was passed, and that said women should maybe be allowed to vote as well. We're going to make that a constitutional thing.
Yes.
And then people were like, yeah, okay, but also no.
Right. Basically, all the poll taxes and literacy tests and grandfather clauses that extended to black people after the 15th Amendment in 1870 basically was just, boop, now it applies to...
Also women, especially black women for sure.
Right.
But things were moving forward. Unfortunately, like literacy tests and poll taxes remained legal well into the 1960s.
Yes.
And unfortunately, 1965 with the Voting Rights Act, that was when those things finally got banned.
Yeah, 64 and 65, poll tax and the Voting Rights Act was passed, banning literacy tests. And I did have a fun fact from my research. Right around when the 19th Amendment was passed, allowing women to vote in the state of Georgia, apparently 97% of black voters were deemed ineligible to vote based off literacy and poll taxes and whatever grandfather clauses. But essentially, only 3% of black people were allowed to vote in the state of Georgia. So those things really mattered. They made a huge difference. And you look at states like Louisiana, who, as soon as the 15th Amendment was passed, had pretty good representation, or like right off the bat in southern states like Louisiana, Mississippi, and then give the old boys a couple years to make up some tests and kind of shift things around, and wow, it starts going back to all white people being representatives, like black people were representatives, like it was more than just voting.
Yeah, and and you think about like the long-term implications of that, like how many of those policies still form the foundations of current policies in these states and in our country. That you look at issues where they just got rid of equal opportunity. The Supreme Court overturned
Affirmative action.
And I'm like, yeah, we've solved racism now. Everything's good. We had a black president,
Right.
and it's really easy to look at everything today and be like, oh, this law isn't racist. I don't see how this law is racist. I don't see how the foundations of these laws and policies are racist. And everybody should have an equal opportunity in the land of the free-ish and the home of the brave. And it goes back, it's like redlining and all these structural things that have put people so far behind and instilled just the structural racism and the structural prejudice that even people who aren't intending to be discriminatory still end up being discriminatory following these policies. And
Right. And that's, I mean, we just didn't really intend to go this far into it, but this is where you get the critical race theory involved. Is basically it's lawyers trying to fight against these laws that are racist.
Yep.
That's where it started, and that's really where.
But teaching it to kindergartners is just going too far now.
Yeah, I know they want to fight against the poll tax laws. I know they do. They really do.
Just to be clear, none of us believe kindergartners are being taught critical race theory, because they are not being taught critical. It is not in any. If you're in any public school under the age of probably 20 years old, you have not been taught critical race theory. So it's just not being taught. It's just not being taught.
Just
be mad about something less stupid, please.
There's plenty to be mad about.
That's so much to be mad about. You don't need to be mad about shit you made up.
All right. Well, last one here, 1971, in the wake of World War II and Vietnam War, the 26th Amendment was passed, which allowed 18-year-olds now to vote nationwide. If you can fight, you can vote.
Yeah.
That was the slogan, which, I mean, obviously makes sense. If you're 18, you're a full adult.
Yeah.
So I don't know why 21 was ever, like, if you're going to make it, I mean, it's not even worth discussing, because they didn't have any like research of like, when does your brain develop? Is it 21? Is it 25? Is it 18? Like, they didn't have that kind of research back when they made the rule for 21 only. Regardless, so it's a moot point. But
it's funny to me, because it used to be you could drink at 18, but you couldn't vote till 21, and then they switched it. Now, which, I mean,
because reasons.
I just feel like this is the way it should be. So anyway, that's how we've kind of gotten to where we are. We haven't had a whole lot of updates in election structure since the 1970s.
Those are the basically laws and constitutional amendments that have been passed. Obviously, there's been a lot of history since the 70s about voting rights and fighting for them or trying to take them away. specifically things that the Republican Party has been doing recently to take away disenfranchising, people from gaining voting rights.
I mean, I think felons, for example, is a big one, and
Yeah,
that's
in
state by
Minnesota,
state.
just allowed felons to now become voters again. So it's a whole nother discussion topic we'll probably bring up, and I think we've touched on it a couple times up to now, but we'll definitely touch on that at some point. But I really just wanted to focus on the bare bones history of where we are today.
So that brings us to kind of like what's going on. We were talking a little bit earlier about it's an off-year election for certain places and certain people. There's some ballot initiatives, some filling in vacant seats, some school board stuff. Minnesota has a few coming up, which you found here.
Yeah, I really found there was basically three main things that I think were Ballotpedia focused on, like major cities, like the top 100 cities in the country, which I think is a pretty fair.
Absolutely.
Focus on 100 cities and local municipalities specifically in those 100 cities. I think that's a very fair blanket. But basically, there's one House representative for the Minnesota House of Representative seat that was vacated by a Democrat earlier this year in September. And so now there is a special election race that is going to be had. There's the primary on the 16th of November, and then the actual election is going to be held in December on the 6th. I guess the state Secretary of State wanted to give more people more time to get to know these people. And
makes sense. I mean, you don't want to go vote for people that you just heard about yesterday, like half of Congress did today or yesterday, selecting their Speaker of the House.
I had not heard of Mark Johnson before either, but
isn't it Mike Johnson?
There you go.
Who's that guy?
Yep.
Half the Republicans, the Republican senator from South Dakota said, I just heard about him for the first time this week. Like a federal Republican didn't know who the current Speaker of the House is.
To be fair, there, like you said, there's 435 to 451 of them representatives, and I couldn't tell you most of the Democrat ones either, but
I could tell you a solid list of ones that would be in the running for Speaker of the House.
Right? You think you'd after like seeing who's on there, you'd be like, okay, like maybe I'll look up at these 10 people and do a little bit of research, or I don't know. My high school class was like 350-ish people, and I could name every single one of them back when I was in high school.
Wow.
Like, I mean,
that's genuinely impressive. I had like 90 kids, and I sometimes they'll walk up to me today, and I'm like, "Who are you?" Or like,
I've run across a couple of them since college in like Minneapolis, just going about, and I've had to go to Facebook to like go to photos or just like the class our class group on Facebook to find people's names. But I think I easily knew over 300 people's name. I maybe could have forgotten a couple.
No, that's impressive. I forget people's names all the time. But
So-
I think we tell you that to tell you this. I'd say a few days or a few weeks to get to know the candidates is probably not a bad thing.
No, yeah, but okay. So that's the only seat that is up for election in this
In our state,
in this cycle in this year. Obviously, even years are presidential and House Representatives, Senate seats are a lot more in flux. So this is kind of not only is it non-presidential year, not only is a just like normal election year, it's an off year, which is why I rated it a 1. But and the next thing I think is actually maybe more important. The House of Representatives from Minnesota is still, I think it was like 69, 66, and then 1 independent. So if this House seat flips,
it narrows
our margin of the Democrats, but it definitely doesn't create like a 50-51 or 51-49 sort of situation that we have in the Senate. So it's less dire, and the candidate who retired or left office, she had won it pretty handily the year or when she was elected last time, and it's been Democrat held, I think, for the past 3 or 4.
So it should be pretty safe.
It should be, and there's there's a couple candidates. There's like 3 or 4 Democrats running. There's the Republican person who ran against Ruth Richardson, who held the seat. She's running again. So yeah, it'll be interesting. But one thing that I think is more very much more local, but possibly equally as important, is the Anoka-Hennepin School District. There are 3 districts that are up for election, and there are some unions on one side and some other third-party groups on the other side.
Okay.
So, like, there's some political pressure that's being applied to some of these candidates. It's Anoka-Hennepin is a really big school district.
It's huge, yeah.
So, like, I mean, I guess if you're gonna, put political pressure on a school board, this is probably one that deserves a little bit more of attention. So I could pull up the names. I don't think it's super necessary, but basically you have 2 sides to this school issue.
Yeah.
Basically, I kind of summed it up here. So side A wants to give our students, teachers, and staff the tools, resources, and support necessary to maintain a safe, inclusive environment that is welcoming to all. By building upon the gifts and talents of each student in our care, we help ensure their success. Some of that is from the union, and some of that is directly quoted from some of the candidates.
Okay.
And then same for side B is the third-party group and some of the candidates. So they say they promote parental rights on political, religious, and moral issues. Additionally, they are committed to ensuring our children are protected from violence and politicized instruction.
That's some fancy buzzwords. They got
yeah,
politicized instruction.
Politicized instructions.
And violence. What are they going on about violence? That's an interesting.
I mean, gun violence, school shootings.
I feel like that's not what they're aiming for here.
I looked on the third party sort of. It's I forget what it's called, but basically the third party place that is pushing for 3 particular candidates on the side. Their website is a single page. No additional pages other than if you want to give them money, they'll send you their PayPal page. But essentially, they have 3 lines. The first 2 are like, we want to support our children. Their education is the most important thing. And then also, by the way, we really care about making sure there's no politicized instruction in our schools. So, like, there's really only one thing that anybody would have any issue with. The first 2 are like, yep, that's everybody says that every single time.
Yeah. I'm just gonna go out and say I don't know what either of these sides are. I don't know who's running, but probably the one that has more than 1 page would be a solid one to throw your backing behind. Also, just always vote union if you haven't.
If you haven't picked that up from us, we're pretty union strong here. But I actually didn't go to the union website. I assume the union website probably has more than 1 page. To be fair, they put their like statements out in this article I was reading, so I didn't have to go to their site. And I thought that what they put out was pretty good. So
pretty solid. Yeah.
Was not questionable.
No. Yeah, I've got a lot of questions about the 3 lines from the other ones. So.
Right. Parental rights. I even tried to Google parental rights and get just maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm assuming something. But
it's one of those buzzwords they use all the time. That's basically like, we want to be prejudiced, but we can't outright say it. So we're going to say parental rights, which means we don't want, them trans kids around.
Right.
Or
we don't want LGBTQ books that don't even have anything to do with sex, to just, be around or just be discussed in any way. Or just available to them, whether or not
we don't want our kids to know these people exist,
right?
Because it makes me feel icky.
Yeah, it's not within our religion to have that, which is why side B also promotes school vouchers, and school choice, in which I say go found a charter school with your own political people, and you make a charter school that does that. Why are you trying to enforce your beliefs upon a public institution that has withstood over 100 years of existing?
How dare you? How dare you try to restrict my freedom to tell other people what their kids should be taught?
Yep, that pretty well sums it up.
And then Minnetonka's apparently trying to repeal ranked choice voting.
Yeah, Minnetonka did vote to implement ranked choice voting in 2020, and they used it to reelect their previous 3-time mayor to become the next mayor. And now in November again, on November 7th, they're having a ballot option to change that and go back to the antiquated worst way to vote that we have currently. Like we've said a bunch of times, ranked choice voting is not perfect by any means, but it is a
exponentially better.
It's a whole grade point, above what we have currently for national elections. So,
yeah, well, all right,
some
Minnetonka.
Some people are trying to go backwards a little bit. Seems to be a common theme, unfortunately.
Well, and Minnetonka is an interesting place too for all of the non-Minnesota people who aren't from this area. It's very much our cliche wealthy neighborhood, but you kind of get that mix of, you have a lot of highly educated,
right,
wealthy people that live there. And that gives you a lot of really progressive people and a lot of fairly conservative people because they're rich conservative people.
Yeah, it's the perfect storm of old white people.
It really is. It really is.
Not all old, but
it's a neolib nightmare is really what it is.
It's I wouldn't say hellscape. But,
not a hellscape. It's a very pretty place.
It's a very pretty place.
They have a nice lake.
Who wouldn't want to live on a lake that's decently sized, and there's a lot the property value.
Oh my God, yeah.
Way
Like
up
it's stupid level, especially when you consider like a suburb of Minneapolis.
Right.
Know?
Yeah.
But anyway, enough about Minnetonka and
Right.
all of the jokes that only people from here will get. I think it's time we move on to really talking about local elections in general, not the stuff that's coming up specifically, but just the fact that local elections are kind of the backbone of government, and we ignore them all the time. They aren't the glitzy, glamorous stuff that we get that gets all the airtime and the funding, and most people don't know the people on their own county commission board or their own local government, let alone
And I don't think you need to be like their like biographer by any means. You don't need to read books that are potentially written by them.
No,
but if you know, like, all right, well, I've heard them say this, so I like that. I'm gonna spend 30 minutes of my day on a random Tuesday to say those people stand for what I stand for. It makes a big difference.
And I think just to underline how important it is it's sad. It used to be that local politics were a lot less politicized.
I mean, all politics have been hyper politicized in the last 2 decades, but
for sure,
local elections have followed suit.
And a lot of times you didn't have to belong to any party. You could just run on, hey, my name's Bob and I'm the party of Bob, and my kid goes to this school and I have some opinions and I think I have some other people agree with me, and people elect Bob.
Right.
And that's kind of
totally fair.
Absolutely.
I mean, you don't have to be an ex-educator. You don't have to be an administrator. Some of the candidates in Anoka Hennepin County or the school district were just parents, and just one's a mechanical engineer. That's just his job. Which turns out he's one of the guys on side B. But
go figure. But I mean, that is sometimes just involved concerned parents are as equally qualified for these local positions. But to show you how important they actually are, is these have gotten a lot more scrutiny from the national parties in recent years, especially. I think a lot of parents got really frustrated with COVID shutting down schools and whatnot.
I think a very frustrating time for people who didn't have kids, but to have kids during COVID and try to clearly the results of kids who were stuck at home,
not great.
Just did absolutely performed to a lesser extent than they should. So there's no denying that was a frustrating time.
And I think that frustration got a lot of parents more interested in who was making these decisions, and unfortunately, making decisions out of frustration isn't always the best thing to do. But there are certain people who know how to leverage that frustration and quite a few national super PACs started funding very hyper local
Yeah.
races, especially with like school boards and county commissions and like things like that.
Yeah, the attorney generals and the secretary of states
Yep.
for each individual state. A lot of those elections got just massive amounts of fundings over the last 5 to 10 years. Even clearly, it matters to them. It matters to the national DNC, to the GOP. It matters to those major groups and those major special interest groups. So
And
if it matters to them,
yeah, it should
they don't
matter to
even
you.
live here. You do. You gotta deal with the results of what happens. So I think it matters. It should matter to you as much, if not more, than those organizations.
Just as a point of reference, the 1776 Project PAC, Super PAC, between April and August of 2021, spent over $2 million on school board elections in localities. They continue to fund, and they have gotten their candidates, conservative candidates, elected, even in places like Philadelphia and Minneapolis, right here at home.
Sure.
And it just speaks to the testament of they see the potential of getting people into politics who will be the next crop. This is where people start in politics.
You start on the school board, or you start just city council, and then you basically can get recruited from there by your party, whatever, and then you get propped up. And so those races do.
Well, they matter
like
for
a
that.
pipeline, you could say.
It is. But it's also important to remember that getting policy passed on a local level, if you get that passed on enough local levels, that's just as bad. If not, it's probably worse than being passed on a state level or a federal level.
Right. The federal, capability to constrain states is rightfully so limited. And so what your state does is arguably as important as what the federal level does. So
Absolutely. And then what your localities do, because if you get a few dozen school boards throughout a state to start passing policy, they start influencing the policy for that entire state, because materials and context, there's only so many resources that can be used to get these things, to get textbooks and things like that. And that starts limiting the funding and the access to even school board or school districts that don't pass these. And what makes it worse is once these things get passed, you're not just dismantling a single state law or a single federal law that you need to reverse or amend to fix the problems that these create. Now you have to go district by district.
Sure.
If they want to ban, if you get 20 school districts to ban certain books, you can't just go and pass a statewide. You could, but it's a lot harder to just pass a statewide rule to get that undone.
And it's to some extent not the responsibility of the state government to be setting school board level policy.
No,
and so they generally don't make a habit out of it, and it has to be a pretty significant issue for them to take really any stance and step in any way. I mean, sort of the opposite of that is in Florida, where like the school boards are being pushed an initiative. But
same with Texas,
right. It's interesting.
It is. But that's something to really keep a point on, and just to remember that these are organizations full of people that are not from your community that are spending millions of dollars to influence the elections in your community. And those elections are a lot easier to influence because a lot of these people don't have any campaign funds. You're going to a town hall meeting, you're like, again, my name's Bob. This is what I feel. So now you give somebody a radio ad or a TV commercial or just
name recognition, I think, is probably like political spending. The best thing that you can spend money on early on is name recognition.
Absolutely.
Once you sort of reach a certain plateau of name recognition, how much that helps you, especially in national elections. But for local elections, where there's essentially zero name recognition for either person, if one candidate has a significantly larger fund to draw upon when handing out flyers, putting up signs, like that can make a major difference.
It really can. And And if they find it important enough to spend that kind of money, because they could be spending those millions of dollars on statewide races, on federal races, and they're spending it on localities,
Right.
on individual districts. And that just goes to show you how important it is and how much influence those races can actually have on the grand scheme of things.
Oh, yeah.
So it's really, really, I can just not stress it enough, worth paying attention to
Right.
what is going on in those
Probably
local.
more so now than ever, than it's ever been.
Absolutely. And there's been a way bigger focus, especially on schools. I think schools are
The education, yeah, in general.
education in general. And it's horrifying because the damage that's done to education now, even if we fix it in a couple years,
Right.
has lasting effects
Oh, yeah.
for decades,
Yeah.
and it's really easy to just pass by those boring local elections and forget about that stuff. But this is your kid's future,
Right. And like I said, I would put this as like a 1, maybe like a 1.5, depending upon where you live, as far as like if you're going to rank the, elections every year through 1 through 4.
Yep.
But for people in Hennepin and Anoka County, this is definitely more than a 1 for you. For people in Minnetonka who want a fairer way to vote, it's definitely not a 1 for you. And it's the same way for a couple other states that have some actual statewide ballots. Minnesota does not have any statewide ballots, but specifically Ohio has had a couple recently and has one in November. Maine has a cool one that I highlighted that are, pretty big deals to people who live there, but just don't make the big waves.
Yep. Yeah, and it's important to know. And you can make serious change with ballot initiatives. And Ohio has been a great example of that.
Right.
I think Ohio has improved voting access and kept ballot initiatives on a simple majority ballot initiative as an option for voters because they tried to undo that and make a 2/3. I think it was a 2/3.
Yeah, 60% super majority needed in order to make a constitutional amendment.
And that's insane. And people showed up. On what would have been a not normal voting day for them.
Yeah. Granted, it wasn't even. It was this year. It was just in the middle of the year, not even on an election day, and
they picked it. I mean, they strategically picked it because they wanted this ballot initiative to pass,
and they wanted the least amount of people to vote, or they wanted the people that they highlighted it to vote. Right. I think that's the only reason why you would put something like that on a random, like, what was it, like September or August or something?
Yeah,
like that?
it was this summer. It wasn't that long ago.
Like, why not wait until November when people are thinking about, it's since the first Tuesday, like, hey, we're supposed to vote on stuff, right? I think that's like the thing we're supposed to do as citizens.
Yep.
No, we're gonna do something on not when a day that you did not associate when you're like, it's summertime. I'm gonna go enjoy myself.
Yeah, I'm definitely not gonna fucking vote for shit. That sounds boring. Yeah, and that's. But it's uplifting. It's inspiring to see that people are paying enough attention and people are showing up to try to somehow preserve their democracy.
And specifically for Ohio, they're standing up for each citizen's right to just sort of have influence, any influence, because people feel, and I think rightfully so, that government is sort of floating away from them, and their direct involvement in democracy is being eroded. And so ballot measures and ballot initiatives I think we should have more personally.
Oh, absolutely.
I think it's absolutely insane.
I don't even know why it's a question.
Right. We should do more of it. We're no longer in a situation where we can't have a much more direct form of democracy. And especially if we did electronic voting.
Oh my God, yeah.
There should be absolutely zero reason why we don't have a ballot measure every single year about something.
And all the big things, like, representative democracy is okay, but when you can do direct democracy, why don't you do direct democracy?
Why have less democracy?
Right.
Why be? Oh yeah, we should prefer representatives to make those choices. Well, why not the people? Why not actually give freedom for people instead of just making them go through this political channel in which you have a certain amount of power, and
And I mean, you have substantially less power because your representative has no obligation to do even the things he said he would do or she said she would do. I mean, Kristen Sinema is a great example of
Yeah,
that.
Joe Manchin.
Yeah, Joe Manchin. I mean, like, they can do whatever they want when they get in.
Yeah.
They can prioritize whatever they want, and that might not be what you want. And if you've got the option between this person who kind of sucks and this person who, given the chance, I'd run over them with my car, those are. And that's your participation in democracy.
But neither one you'd want to be a hitchhiker in your
No,
car.
neither. You get that. That's your two options, and that's your participation in democracy is just picking between,
Yeah, and that's how you end up with a 60% voter participation scoring rating, like
which is abysmally low.
It's pretty bad. But honestly, America deserves that rating based off of how well our political parties have been functioning. So, like, I get it that it sucks and people should go out to vote, but I also understand when people say that they feel like they have no voice.
Absolutely, yeah, and rightfully so.
Obviously.
Well,
yeah, then that brings us to some national elections here that are coming up in November here. So basically, there's 2 House seats that are voting this year, no Senate seats this year. There's 1 Republican seat in Utah, and there's 1 Democratic seat in Rhode Island. However, I don't think it's going to be a really interesting race.
Yeah.
Both of the people who left those seats won that seat by over 20 points each. I think it was actually over 25 points.
Okay. Yeah.
So unless something insanely drastic happens to those races,
they're pretty safe.
Yeah, they're pretty safe on both sides, which leads us to ballot measures nationally, and Ohio is back with a couple more. Actually, they have 2 issues, they call them, that are actually pretty significant. The first one being issue 1, the right to make reproductive decisions, including abortion initiative is what it's called. Basically, it's asking people, do you want abortion to be protected or do you not want it to be protected? The way that they phrased the question on the actual ballot is actually flipped. So it's like, do you want to restrict abortion, or what is the yes? The no, I believe, is the actual, like,
that's an important point to bring up too, is when you do go vote on these things, make sure you really understand the question.
It's like an SAT. Like, reread the question.
It really is, because they want to trip you up on those, especially usually the people writing these initiatives. Like, this is obviously the anti-choice people that wrote this initiative.
Usually when it's a dissenting freedom sort of choice, it's usually more complicated and less clear than they really need to make it to be.
Because if you just put it out there the way it was supposed to be, nobody would vote. They're literally essentially tricking people into trying to pass their bullshit.
Yeah, their abortion restrictions. Yeah.
So make sure you read it. Make sure you understand it. If you're having trouble with it, ask somebody or
go to ballotpedia.org. If they want to sponsor us.
we will say your name every episode.
That's right. 2024. We're really looking forward to some election coverage, and we'd love some financial help.
Yeah, all the financial help would be great.
Saying, just saying. Then they have issue 2, which would legalize the recreational or personal use of marijuana, and so it's not the first state to do this. I think there's like 24 states that currently have marijuana legalized,
including us,
including Minnesota. Woo, woo. The interesting thing about Ohio here is that it would, if they passed it, essentially over 50% of America would live in a state where marijuana is now legalized.
And that would put us really close to that federal legalization level.
Right. That like the blue line, the magic blue line that we were talking about is, I think, around 60% of the population, or 60% of states legalizing or having some sort of decision is when it begins to gain national traction and sort of reach its exponential conclusion.
So that'd be awesome. Yeah.
We are getting close to the legalization of marijuana, which is, it's not even so much that I care that much about legalizing marijuana. I want it to be if anything, just decriminalized. Because
Yeah. I mean, I don't use marijuana. I've tried it a couple times, and it's not something that I find
you're not gonna go on record saying you did not inhale.
I did not inhale. I've never actually smoked. I may have not inhaled once. I don't know.
Yeah, no, I've not inhaled a couple times.
But I got no issue with it. I drink a astronomical amount of alcohol.
You participate in a different type of drug.
And to me, I'm not judgy. And again, it's the fact that it ruins so many people's lives just by the fact that it's criminalized.
Yeah, obviously, and going back to minorities, it was specifically designed to criminalize black people.
Absolutely.
Because they used it more. Use it
no,
more.
It's
used it at similar amounts, but just was policed more in those areas. Yeah,
policed more.
No,
it's
right.
and it's like the differentiation between crack and cocaine.
Right.
It's the way that they just decide to enforce these laws
and enforce it. Yeah. Thank you for saving me from doing something dumb. All right, and then Maine, Ballotpedia showed me. Highlighted a couple initiatives. This was one of them. Maine, their question 3 was, I thought, interesting because this is something that I talk about all the time between the two of us and just our role that government plays. So their question is, do you want to create a new power company governed by an elected board to acquire and operate existing for-profit electricity transmission and distribution facilities in Maine?
Yes.
So essentially, they would create a new company called the Pine Tree Power Company, and it would be a nonprofit, customer-owned utility. And this is what I say all the time: is the role of government should be to not allow, things that people need to exist, necessities like power, water, sewage. It should not be run by a for-profit business that is going to profit off of your, necessities to live. That doesn't make sense to me. And so this is something that I would personally be extremely happy if Minnesota did something like this. But it's a lot easier in Maine. There's basically 2 companies, and one company owns like 80% of the production of electricity. So it's
and we've got counties bigger than Maine, so
pretty much, yeah.
But that would be very cool. Yeah, absolutely. I agree. I think all utilities should be nationalized or at least state run.
Yeah, I mean, I could think of like internet being somewhat challenging just because of the infrastructure that's involved with that. But obviously, electricity, water, some food production.
I mean, I'd even personally be for nationalizing our energy. I mean, our energy industry is in oil and everything as well.
Yeah. I mean, that's the way that Norway does it, and it's extremely popular in Norway.
Yeah.
Like, it pays for colleges. It makes all citizens of Norway essentially, like, their total assets already be like over 100,000 just from being an adult living in Norway.
That'd be so cool.
It's an insane thing that the way, of course, Norway is much smaller people, and so it wouldn't be as impactful for Americans. But still, imagine being able to fall back and not have so much of our income be taxed if some of the funds that were generated by selling oil, by producing oil and oil-based products, that you'd get some like unemployment security and stuff like that, or just like paid family leave benefits that Minnesota is doing. Just imagine if that was nationwide and that was paid for not just by your income tax, but also by the profits generated by those industries.
Absolutely.
That we all need to survive, not just a clothing company, not just a toy company or a TV manufacturer, like literal natural resources. Also, they're natural resources. They're in the ground.
Yeah.
Like, why does a corporation get to say like, oh, I own this piece of land that is America?
And also, half the time they don't own it. I mean, a lot of times it's on public land.
Yeah, they just get like a permit to utilize the land
and extract the resources.
And extract the resources.
And the fact that we're not getting, as the public, our cut of the...
Well, right, we get the taxes based off of the profits of a corporation, but what do you think corporations are really good at?
Yeah.
Avoiding taxes on their
profits.
It's
their whole shtick.
It's like, how do you... Just GE, back in the day. Amazon, obviously.
I have Amazon today, yeah.
Right.
Well, and if we nationalized the oil industry and just the energy industry in general, we would have, people complain about prices and try to blame it on the president or the government all the time, but they've got almost zero control over what the prices are. But
Right
Saudi
now-
Arabia and OPEC has a lot of control over what our prices are.
obviously.
But we're the largest producing nation in the world for
We
oil.
produce more oil than any country in the world right now.
And so if we were like, if we had a centralized control over what we were doing with that oil, a national control over that, we could be swinging a hammer around the same way that OPEC does, and we could keep our prices.
We could probably impact our prices a lot more, which, I mean, to a certain extent, I don't know that we should be like influencing our own prices. It should probably still be based off of a market-based pricing, because if we lower our prices, that means domestically, that means we probably have to raise them internationally, which we are already the richest country, and we already have the most access to industrialized, basically benefits, and by increasing the cost of oil and in less industrialized countries, who put an immense strain on their ability to become industrialized.
That's true. And that's one of those things. It's like, where do our priorities lie, I guess, because in the same sense, $4 a gallon gas really hurts Americans here at home.
Well, right. It's $4 now. Not even $4 in 2008 or whatever it was.
And so it hurts our economy. It hurts us probably more than it hurts any other country, if that makes sense, just because we have so much of a reliance on energy that it affects our economy and our economic performance.
I could see that argument
to a larger extent.
I would refer to documented materials to give me like a definitive answer.
Right. I'm making shit up currently.
How big is that impact? But
this is totally me hypothesizing.
Hey, I mean, it's cool to sort of like theorize and all that, and just.
And once again, we are way off topic.
Yes.
So.
All right, bringing it back to Maine and Ohio. So we talked about financing for elections, and Ballotpedia actually found that there's a huge financing push for some of these ballot initiatives. And so I thought it was very interesting to know massive amounts of millions and millions of dollars. So for Maine alone, just this one issue about the electrical company, there was about $1 million spent supporting the initiative to basically nationalize the electric industry. $35 million was spent opposing this initiative. So you can see, if they have $35 million to throw around to oppose an initiative that would make them non-existent, clearly they are getting a lot of money, or enough money to be able to throw around $35 million.
Exactly.
So those are savings that the citizens of Maine could be reaping. And I'm sure they are falling on just as tough times as the rest of the country is with inflation. They could use a $35 million decrease in their prices right now.
Absolutely. And it's worth noting that usually if you see where the most money is being spent, it's probably not the way you should be voting. I mean, if you're going, don't ever base your entire decision solely on that.
Sure.
But it's definitely a good spot to start, being like, if they're throwing this much money at it, there's got to be some reasons why.
Especially when it's so lopsided. Like, it's one thing if it's like 50-50-ish. You're like, all right, well, like, clearly this is pretty divided among, the country, or just like people who are in power who have millions of dollars to throw around at this. So like, all right, well, I'll make my own decision. But 1 to 35 rate, that's pretty rough.
That's
bad. Pretty rough. And then going to Ohio for question 1 here about the abortion initiative there, and maybe I was mistaken about the specific wording of this, but essentially $11 million is supporting this initiative, and $16 million is opposing the initiative.
Okay.
So, and I probably was incorrect before about the wording. And because when I put the notes in here and the specific like supporting and opposing, I knew like which side was which. But
it's worth saying there is a lot of money that gets thrown at pro women's healthcare and stuff like that. That's
I mean, either way, I don't feel like if you're gonna compare the two, 16 and 11,
it's not that hugely lopsided.
Not that crazy lopsided. No. And then when we go back to the August ballot measure for the 60% vote requirement to approve constitutional amendments in Ohio, I think it was close to 50-50 again, but the total amount was a staggering $45 million spent on Ohio propaganda, essentially. Billboards, commercials, flyers, radio commercials, whatever.
Insane.
$45 million.
For a ballot initiative.
For a ballot initiative. Clearly, people care about constitutional amendments and the people's right to have a bigger voice or
Absolutely.
a smaller voice from your perspective.
Depending on which side the money's coming from.
Right.
Yeah. So again, they're willing to spend that much money on these things. You should be willing to spend a little bit of your time to educate yourself enough to go make a moderately educated vote on them.
Right. Spend 10 minutes of research. I think I obviously spent more, but I think can easily be done in under 30. I think if you have 10 minutes, and then unfortunately, it's not like there's like a centralized location where of like news and like just like anybody giving like a informed just like stance upon like who's running, what their particular views are, especially when you get down to this localized stuff. I think it'd be really interesting if there was such an organization. Ballotpedia was pretty good about giving me if they had posted anything on their website and if they had basically filed their election filings in the right time frames. They had a lot of information on there, which I found to be very good. Cool. But it's ballotpedia.org. It's not like an app or something that's really user like.
No, there's no user-friendly way to look this stuff up. But it is the age of the internet, and most people can.
Like I said, I found it all out, and it didn't take me that long. So it's doable.
All right. And then next year is the big year again.
Yeah, 2024. This is on a scale of 1 to 4. This is the 4.
Yeah.
There's nothing more important really than the presidential election year. You could argue midterm.
You could
argue midterm.
I'll give you that. The presidential election year, I'd say there's more important things than even the presidential election
Right,
itself.
but it includes the most. It's the presidential election year on top of everything that you would normally vote for in a midterm election year. So
no, I agree. I'll
in that sense, I would say it's a 4.
Absolutely.
Midterm is a 3.
For sure.
And then really there's not a lot out for next year other than presidential right now, and I figure we'll spend a lot more time.
Yeah, we'll
on
get into
presidential,
all that stuff
after a couple more have been knocked down or decided to change parties, whatever. But there is one election that I wanted to highlight. There's 2 Senate seats that have special elections next year, next November. I don't know why they're being held next year instead of this year, but that's just what the states decided on.
Yeah, because they want to throw them in with the regular.
Okay, yeah, I could see that.
The regular election cycle, just because again, your voter turnout is abysmally low compared to regular election years, especially presidential election years. So
right,
if you're fighting for a seat, you're gonna want to do it when you're gonna get the most people coming out to vote.
Yeah,
depending on who you are.
That's totally fair. So there's 2 seats that have special elections on top of just the normal seat rotations. There's one in Nebraska, but that is hugely in favor of a Republican seat. Again, like 20 points plus. That was won by a Republican candidate. But one that is quite interesting is in California. Recent passing away of Dianne Feinstein.
Took her long enough.
Yeah, her seat needs to be filled, and it's interesting because she won by a pretty small margin. She won only by about 6 points in her last election. Obviously, she's been there for a long time, but this most recent one, she only won by 6 points, and that is really, really close.
It is.
Even if you're an incumbent, that is pretty close, pretty small margin.
That's very close for a California senator. Like, absolutely. I think that a lot of that had to do with the fact that Dianne Feinstein was not doing a whole lot of campaigning, and she was 140,000 years old at the time of her passing.
You got me there.
I personally don't think there's a ton of threat to the seat being flipped red.
Is that a seat that Diane Porter or
Katie Porter? Katie Porter is running for that. So there's 3 candidates running for it.
Which Katie Porter for president?
Absolutely. Well, Katie Porter needs to spend some time in the Senate. I think she can do far more damage, good damage.
You're probably right.
And because once people become president,
Well, right, they get tops 8 years, and then they're basically, they're relegated to doing a speech once or twice a year. That people,
they don't go back to the Congress.
no, which,
after that,
I don't know, could they?
They could.
I think they could.
I
Right?
don't see why they couldn't. I don't think there's any rules. But I mean, why the fuck would you want to after you've been president? Like, what are you gonna go?
Right. You write like 1 or 2 books, and you're like, oh, I'm now worth like $50 million. And why go work for a living when I can go on unless you're Joe Biden. Why would I?
Yeah, it makes no sense. But yeah, Katie Porter is definitely the person you should support if you can vote in California for senator. She's awesome. Just go look her stuff up. She is not funded by super PACs. She's walking the walk, talking the talk, and
she's holding people accountable. That's like her thing.
It is her thing, and she does it in the most entertaining ways possible. She busts out a whiteboard.
Really does.
She makes them play Jeopardy to answer questions about how much they suck at their own job. It's great. It is a beautiful thing. She's got that Midwest mom thing going on.
From California, but
I mean, she's from Iowa.
Oh, yeah.
She's born in Iowa. She lives in California, represents California now, but she is from Iowa, and yeah, that Midwest passive aggressive. She's got it down to an art form that few people can manage. So
she is pretty special. I hope that she is nominated or wins whatever she has to win to be able to run for that seat, and then obviously I hope that she wins. I think she will. She's I think incredibly popular.
Yeah.
Especially within, I think, millennials. So I don't think there's any real reason to think that she would not win.
No. Yeah, I mean, there's what the hell is his name? The other Democratic congressman from California that Adam Schiff. He's running.
Oh, I've heard of him. Yes.
Yeah, he's running. He made a lot of waves, under Trump's presidency, trying to hold Trump accountable, especially with the impeachment efforts and stuff like
really
that.
Work that well, but
no, it didn't.
Good try.
And Adam Schiff has a lot of name recognition, especially in California and nationally, and
I know his name. Mm-hmm. That's about it.
Mm-hmm.
But
I mean, and I don't dislike Schiff, but he's much more a corporate party Democrat. And,
right, which is we don't need more Hakeem Jeffries.
Exactly.
We already got him, and we got a bunch of other people that do the exact same thing and say the exact same stuff.
Yeah.
So
he I think is the biggest threat to the seat, in my opinion.
That could be.
But no, support Katie Porter if you're in any way, shape, or form ability to do that.
Definitely.
She's the person we need. I think it would be hard for anybody to argue anything against her as far as the way that she has upheld herself so far in seat, Democrat, Republican, or otherwise.
Yeah, I mean, she's definitely what people like to call one of the adults in the room, and she has that mom vibe. Like she's gonna kick butt. She's gonna be like, "Don't make me count to 3," because there's gonna be hell to pay.
And that. Not having the corporate funding, at least when she ran for Congress, I don't know if that'll stick through for Senate. It gets harder and harder.
It's harder and harder the higher you go.
But she definitely isn't beholden to any corporate interest as of now, and I think that earns her our gratitude at this point.
Certainly our respect. And then just minor things. Minor thing is the Republican convention is going to be held in July this year in Milwaukee, actually. And then the Democratic convention is going to be held in August in Chicago. So we're sticking to the Midwest right now with our conventions, which is, I think, probably, you'll get all the crazies will still come. Will still flock to both of them. But
the Midwest is especially after the 2016 and 2020 elections, clearly a huge battleground area. And I think
Michigan, Wisconsin, Iowa.
I don't think holding the conventions here is by mistake from either party. I
Probably
think
not.
Very...
Probably not. Did you hear about Joe Biden's kind of riff with New Hampshire recently? So New Hampshire's pretty consistently held the first Democratic primary for Democratic.
I did hear about
Democratic candidates. They for like the last really 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 long time.
Yep,
they've been
and
the
he
first
wants to
state.
start it in Georgia now, right?
South Carolina. He wants to start in South Carolina because he thinks that South Carolina is more of a battleground state, and he wants to give them more attention as being the first one. And so essentially, he's kind of turned his he's given an ultimatum to New Hampshire, and New Hampshire is like, well, we don't care, we're still going to do it first.
Yeah.
But he will not be on the ballot in New Hampshire to be voted for as the primary candidate for the Democratic Party, which is almost doesn't really make a difference for him in this, because there's nobody running against him. It's not an open primary, obviously, with him being the incumbent, so he can kind of do whatever he wants. Turning his back on any voter is bad, and especially when he kind of barely beat Trump last time. If Trump is there again, dissuading anybody from voting for him is not really to his benefit.
Not a great look.
It's not a great look.
I agree. I think, and I think it's a lot of pride on both sides with this one.
Oh yeah, I think it's either why. I get that New Hampshire wants to be the first. It's sort of the tradition, but like, things change.
Yeah.
You can be the second one now. So like, you're still, because people pay attention to the first like 4 or 5 or 6.
That's why anybody only cares about Iowa.
Right, because Iowa's like the 3rd or 4th one.
Yeah.
And so you can still be important, New Hampshire, but not this time.
Yep. No, I agree. I also know that New Hampshire had some policy in their own state, like requiring them to do it on a specific date or requiring them to be the first. I don't know what it is. Again, it seems as petty as fuck. Like,
yeah, and I'm sure as much as Joe Biden thinks he has a good reason, I'm sure New Hampshire believes that they have a good reason for doing that. So
yeah, no, I don't know. It'll be interesting to see how that plays out. But
yeah, well, that's kind of all I had here. So this is our Election Day episode. Basically next year, if we're, I think hopefully we'll still be here. Talking about the next election. This is sort of the precursor leading up to that episode.
And just to keep reminding people that this stuff's coming up. There's now stuff to vote on pretty consistently over the next year. And again, next year's the big one. It's an important one. And it's time now to start understanding what's at stake, what's on the ballots, who's on the ballots, and what you want to see happen in this country and how you can participate and affect that.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of these people that you may or may not like on the Republican side or even the Democratic side, where there was RFK and Marianne Williamson for a time. What happens early on in these election cycles, it really does make a big difference in how much support they're getting, how much funding they're getting. If you like somebody, now is the time to give them money, because now is when they need it the most.
Yep.
So what happens early on really does make a difference, especially in funding. So I'm not saying to give your money to any of those people.
No, dude, please do not give your money to those people. But
I like Marianne Williamson more than like RFK. But
well, that's a pretty low bar. So
it's somewhat of a low bar. Yeah, obviously, like, Bernie's not running specifically because Biden is running again. Otherwise, I'd be Bernie bro, all growing up all over this place. Even though I know he's really old now, and I drag on Biden for being so damn old himself, he does not. He doesn't feel like he's as old as Biden.
He doesn't. He certainly doesn't, but he is, and we need to walk the walk. We need the fossils out. I love Bernie to death, and I support him in all of his endeavors.
Right.
Just not running for president anymore.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. As long as he does good. I mean, obviously he's very much different than Mitch McConnell and Dianne Feinstein.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like, he is still able to be one of the most articulate people in the Senate right now, and has been for decades. And
I agree, but we've got plenty of younger progressive candidates out there that I think Bernie just needs to throw his weight behind.
Yeah, okay, that's what I'm saying. Yeah, I don't know that there's like just a ton just sitting out there. Just be like, yeah, like, I want to do it, and if only I had somebody. I think like somebody has to make a platform for people that are progressive like him. You're only going to get a few AOC types that just like randomly pop up.
But we're getting more and more. I mean, it is becoming a bigger thing, and I think 2028. Sure. I have a feeling that it's going to be a competitive primary. Yeah,
like in this next. 2024.
No,
2028.
2030.
2030. You're right. That's when I thought it was 2028. But basically you're saying when millennials and Gen Z become the majority electorate.
No, I'm just saying the next presidential election we have where there'll be no incumbent. Well, there might be an incumbent if Biden loses. But assuming Biden wins, the next presidential election, which would be 2030?
2028.
2028. Yeah. Man, you threw me off my game over here.
I was just confirming that that's what you said.
Yeah. It's like, I feel like that's right. Wait, is it wrong? Is that only 2 years? I'm not good at math. Come on. You got to give me a break. 2028, I think will be assuming Biden wins. Even if he doesn't win. Even if he doesn't win, it doesn't matter.
If Trump wins.
Even if Trump wins.
It will definitely still be
a very competitive primary for the Democrats. And I think that we're going to see a lot more people with more socialist policy, or not socialist, more socially progressive, more progressive policies.
Democratic socialist policies.
More
that's what Bernie calls himself.
right. More Bernie-esque, with
he's got his own
less
type
than
of policies now.
Less than 1 foot in the grave type of thing.
Yeah.
Coming out because he's shown the way that this is popular, this can be done. You can make these grassroots movements. He really laid that foundation, and now is not the time. Like with an incumbent running against Trump, it's just not the time.
I mean, his time was 2016.
Yeah.
Right? 2016 was way more popular than Hillary Clinton.
Absolutely.
Just like across, even like just like all people, not just like Democrats.
Just in general. And that,
clearly we know what happened because he was not put up there.
But we've shown he was very competitive in 2 primaries when he shouldn't have been.
Right. Even against Biden, he was very competitive.
And especially considering the way that he was fundraising and not taking corporate money and stuff.
Oh, yeah.
He's shown that there is another way.
There is another way. I mean, he does have a name recognition aspect that most people who are potentially not taking super PAC funds, PAC funds, and I think he still took PAC funding, just not like
corporate money.
But the first time in 2016, I think his major push was like huge grassroots, and I don't think there was any corporate involvement.
And I think that'll continue because people are gaining that name recognition. You're getting to know the AOCs, and they're getting to put more time in. The Katie Porters, and like I think it's coming up. I think we're getting there where we're gonna have more competitive, and I don't know that they'll be the ones nominated in 2028.
You're right. We might get another situation where the Democratic Party pushes him out again, but hopefully not, right?
I think we're moving in the right direction. We're going to have more people, Gen Z is really socially motivated.
Yeah, Gen Z is definitely a bright spot in our future.
And there's going to be a lot more of them voting in 2028.
That's absolutely true.
I got high hopes for that if we don't burn the whole fucking thing down before we get there.
We sort of have to make it that far and not make them hate voting and politics up to that point. More so than they already do.
Yeah.
But anyways, that kind of wraps up this episode, I think.
Yeah, we've gotten all kinds of topics we didn't intend to cover, and sort of cover the topics we did intend to cover.
Yeah,
so
mostly.
It's a good time,
Well, I just want to do a quick shout out to Ballotpedia again.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because I think I will probably go to them.
I use them a ton for my research on my videos, my TikTok videos and stuff too. So
I
they are
found
great.
to be very, very, very well organized and just a ton of good information out there. And thank you everyone for joining us today. Hopefully you hear this and you're voting in Ohio and Maine, everywhere else, and certainly Minnesota. In things that impact you locally.
Absolutely. Thank you guys again for sticking with us and watching. We've had some great response to this so far, and we appreciate it, and we hope it keeps growing. If there's anything you guys want to hear about or listen to us cover, don't hesitate to reach out.
Reach out on the TikTok. We probably should have an email out on our website.
Well,
or something.
we'll set up an email. Otherwise, off Jowagon, I've got an email there.
Right.
You can comment on the YouTube channel as well. We can see that. All these go up on the YouTube channel, off Jowagon on YouTube. We do have a TikTok account. We check all those comments right now. They're pretty sparse. That following's still pretty small. So please follow us there. Help build that up. We're trying to we don't even have enough followers on there to put a link in the bio so we can link that to the rest of the TikTok stuff. So
also it's hard to clip our videos.
It really is hard to clip this stuff. So I know it's not the best content as far as what like TikTok's going for, but
it's not a funny dance video. That's for sure.
It really is not a funny dance video. But yeah, if you guys can follow us there, you can interact with us there. And we definitely want to have this more of a conversation with all of you. Believe me, it helps us, especially when we don't have to come up with everything from scratch and knowing what you guys want to talk about and listen to. So we appreciate it. We appreciate you sticking it out. We love y'all, and we will see you next week.
Absolutely. Thanks for joining us. Let the meat toast.